Sonic, unlike Knuckles, I don't flex my muscles. I'd rather chuckle.
I'd like to begin this video by apologizing for some frankly shoddy editing in part 1. I didn't have that much footage to use, least of all from my original review, so some of these clips were used multiple times. And you know, twice isn't so bad, but this ramp appeared like 7 times in that video, and I got real sick of seeing it pop up in the final cut. I don't know how I didn't catch that when editing these clips together. Sometimes it all just blurs together for me. No one really seems to be bothered by it so far, but still, I feel you guys deserve better than that, so I'll try hard not to let the rest of these videos get so repetitive. Also, a lot of this footage isn't mine. Actually, none of it is aside from the 8-year-old clips from my old review, so I'm gonna do my best to show footage from a select few people and make links to their channels from here on out. I don't have the tools required to record footage of my own for this game. Once upon a time I did, but yeah. Alright, one last thing before we really get things moving. I'm going to talk a little bit about this now, and maybe a little bit in another video. The hub worlds. The freaking hub worlds. Or adventure fields as they're called in this game. I really like them. No, really. I don't love them, but I think they're perfectly fine. The purpose of the hubs in this game is to provide access to all the levels in a way that makes them feel connected, giving you a sense of scale as you see where they are in relation to each other, because they're all a part of one world. I could have done without these fields, but I think they serve their purpose pretty well, and I never got lost or anything because they're nice and small. They're basically just a collection of distinct set pieces with very little fluff padding them out. The Mystic Ruins contains Tails' workshop and his runway, the train station, the Master Emerald Shrine, the temple, Big's house, the waterfall where you fight Chaos 4, and Eggman's ground base. I love that Eggman's ship has a swimming pool and a bedroom and even a warpad to his own private island populated by Chow that he goes to play with whenever he wants to get away from it all. And the Station Square adventure field is really nothing to stress over. It's downright tiny compared to the others. Just a few chambers where you get power-ups that help you out on the main levels or find a key to unlocking another stage. I never had trouble finding my way around to the next part of the game, and the only people who should are either really impatient or they just keep looking in the wrong places over and over again, going everywhere except the one place they should be, and stubbornly overlooking it because something in their mind keeps telling them,
"No, there's no way it would be there. That would be stupid. I know because I read books on game design."
Or maybe they tried it once and something didn't quite connect that time, and then they act so shocked when at their wits' end, they finally try it again after they've looked everywhere else, and it works that time. Where was I going with this? Anyway, compare this to the fields in Sonic 06, which were much larger, had fewer set pieces, and just felt kinda barren. Another thing that makes these hubs less painful than those, there are no side quests. Yeah, there's a few harmless fun minigames, but you never talk to someone and then just start a mission during the campaign, or at least none that are mandatory for completing the main story like walking a dog or doing math or playing hide and seek. There are some extra emblems that you can get by completing side quests when you revisit these fields after being a character's campaign, but those are purely optional and actually reward you by unlocking various older Game Gear games, at least in the DX ports. And there are also hidden emblems layered around that you can just hop over to and nab if you're playing as a character who can reach them. Yeah, free stuff. Even as superfluous as the populace may be, some of them do give you hints, and to call, this glowing light here can help you out too. I do like that you can talk to basically everyone and get to know them a little bit. They have lives, they have things that are going on and change as you proceed through the campaigns, so there is a sense of time flowing that really makes the world feel alive and, again, never gets in the way of anything you're trying to do. Oh sure, the way to the casino or Angel Island might be blocked off at first, but that's because you're not supposed to go there yet. One thing I like about these hubs is how they're all connected, at least later in the game. Once the egg carrier falls into the ocean, you can go there on a raft from the Mystic Ruins or on a more modern boat from Station Square, and you can access both of these places from the egg carrier at the same time. Even better, the entrances to each hub are very close to each other. The raft and the boat are both just outside the train station of their respective hubs, and they each settle on one side of the egg carrier. Another thing that's nice about the hubs, they each have a Chow garden. There are 3. My favorite one is Eggman's Little Island. I'll delve into the finer points of raising a Chow another time though. Point is, the adventure fields are in my book the best hub worlds in any Sonic game, or at least the best at what they're trying to do, if that makes sense. Yeah, I guess it would be nice if you could just jump into every next stage without having to run around the adventure fields for a minute or 3, but honestly, I feel like something would be missing from this world if they weren't there. It would feel empty and incomplete, and I wouldn't have a sense of how these stages all fit together, not to mention the story wouldn't work without some serious rewrites. Now if you do just want to play through the actual stages uninterrupted, you can, after you've played through them at least once as that character in the story mode. The game is a stage select, heck, each character is a stage select, so once you've beaten a stage you can just go back to the menu and replay them as many times as you want. Going back to creating that sense of scale though, even in the levels themselves this works. The best example I can think of is Skydeck. The entire Skydeck stage is set on parts of the egg carrier, which you can see from its adventure field before entering the stage. You go along the bottom of its left wing, then back along the top of the wing, and then you're near the very back of the ship. Heck, you can see one of the egg carrier's engines at the beginning of the stage, and the second part of the stage drops you onto one of those 2-pointed wingtips on the very end, and they are enormous. That's pretty freaking cool. You can even see the giant hole where you blasted the turret at the end of the previous act from the bottom of the wing, and some parts of the back of the wing even tilt up and down while you're on top of them, as if you're the strongest bug in the world clinging to the wing of an incomprehensibly huge airplane. They did a really good job selling how colossal this thing is. Even some of the other stages have little bits like that. The beginning of Emerald Coast has some buildings to the side like you're still next to the hotel where you enter the stage from. There's also a lighthouse at the end of the first act. That's nice. The Lost World stages has one part where you come back outside for a moment to see the mystic ruins in the distance. A lot of them, actually. I think these touches give the game a charm that's missing from some other Sonic games, even other ones that have hubs, but don't quite get that connection, you know? The hubs in Unleashed are great, but they're all so far away from each other, which can't really be helped since they're all set in different countries, but still, you get what I'm saying, right? Still, this game doesn't communicate all of its ideas effectively enough. I have heard so many people over the years ask, why does Angel Island look so huge in some cutscenes, but then you go there and it's just this tiny speck of land? And I am so sick of hearing this. That's not Angel Island, stupid. This is. All of it is. Everything past this tunnel is a part of Angel Island because it crashed on top of the Mystic Ruins right next to Tails' house. It's got Ice Cap Zone just like it did in Sonic 3, and even some later portions of Red Mountain harken back to Lava Reef Zone a bit. I'm just gonna say that the Master Emerald Shrine, which used to be right next to the Echidna City in flashbacks, was lifted into the sky along with Angel Island while the rest of the ruins were left on the ground. There. That's one mystery solved that never should have been a mystery, but the game never really clarified things, so a lot of people came to the wrong conclusion, and I can hardly blame them, really. Sorry for calling you stupid. And to those who think this is just me wasting time to make these videos longer, as if I could enjoy editing videos that much, I have been saying this shit to people for years, and this is the most appropriate time I'll ever be able to do it in a video, and this is going to be my final say on the matter. I'm serious. After this little series is done, I don't ever want to talk about Sonic Adventure again, so I'm not leaving anything out no matter how inane it may seem. Still, surprisingly enough, people seem to like listening to me ramble about unimportant shit, so here we go! Anyway, I know a lot of people can't stand the hub worlds, but that's on them. These are fine. They're designed well, they're nice and small and purposeful, they're not intrusive any more than they inherently are by being hub worlds. I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. I don't know what else I can say about them without overselling this part of the game. It is a little annoying that some players will end up spending a lot more time here than in the actual zones, and I guess that's where people's problem with them stems from how their first playthrough went. I never had an issue with them though, even back then, so I guess that's why they don't bother me so much. Actually, I do have one gripe with the hub worlds, but that's more of a matter of personal taste, so I'll save that for later when we shift our focus to Sonic Adventure 2 in the next video. Anyway, let's move on to the stages, the levels, the zones, where the real action happens. We've already talked a lot about how Sonic plays in the first video, so I'll just wrap up my thoughts on him as quickly as I can before going over the other characters. An interesting thing to note about the levels or zones is that they're each divided into 2 or 3 areas, in Sonic's case anyway. Most of the time, the other characters will only visit one area of the stage if it's their playstyle best and never get to see the other more Sonic-centric areas. I'll delve into this a little later when we talk about Knuckles' gameplay specifically, but for now, I'll say that this makes all the campaigns aside from Sonic's, which are already much shorter than his, over even quicker. Emerald Coast, the first stage in the game, has 2 areas, each featuring their own soundtrack as one part of the stage abruptly jump cuts to the other. The next stage in Sonic's campaign, Windy Valley, contains 3. These mini-levels within each zone can be likened to the acts that made up each zone in the classic games, which usually contain 2 acts per zone, or 3 acts in the case of Sonic 1. One thing you have to understand about Sonic Adventure's level design is that it never really adheres to any one consistent philosophy for very long. The game's 11 stages are consistent enough that a character like Sonic can make it through all of them just fine, save one, Hot Shelter, where they left him out completely, but every stage is very different. Some are more linear, some are a bit more open but still follow a point A to B track, and some are structured more like a playground and loop in on themselves several times, having many layers building up to the end of the stage. The greatest example of the latter would be the second area of Twinkle Park, seen about halfway through Sonic's campaign. The main part of this stage begins with Sonic riding on a roller coaster, showing you most of the places you'll be going to in this act before it even starts. Interestingly enough, while Windy Valley is probably the most linear stage in the game, it used to be one of the most open. Yeah, remember what I said in part 1 about some content being cut from the game? You're about to see it, thanks to one of Sonic's most awesome fans. The first and second areas don't see many changes in the final build, but in an earlier build of the game, the final part of Windy Valley is, to be frank, probably the best stage in the entire game, if not the greatest 3D Sonic stage ever created. It's very open-ended for a Sonic stage, with lots of wide open spaces and intense geometry that you can use to find lots of shortcuts and other pathways. Never does it feel senseless though, as all paths eventually lead to the end of the zone, and the gameplay flows beautifully the entire time. And all the while, these paths don't really feel that separate from each other. They don't feel like corridors or tracks that only occasionally connect. They feel like they're all part of the same environment, as they should, which 3D Sonic games don't quite get right very often. This is the kind of layered level design, making this kind of flow possible, that really completed the Genesis games, and I think it shows that, at least for a time, the makers of Sonic Adventure really were trying to capture how the Genesis games played. For one reason or another, this part of the stage was almost completely scrapped and rebuilt, though if I had to guess why, it was probably because this is one of the earlier stages, and they may have been worried that new players would be overwhelmed and not know where to go in such a big scary 3D environment right out the gate. If that is the case, I don't think they put enough faith in players. Just imagine if all the stages were at least as open and interesting as this. Whatever their reason for doing so, it is sad they felt the need to scrap one of the finest stages in the game in favor of a much more linear and repetitive version. Though amazingly, the original stage has been completely reconstructed by Corvid Dude. Just take a minute to let it sink in, how amazing that is. This is something once thought to be impossible, lost to the ether of games that never were, and now it can be enjoyed on an emulator. I'm happy about this because this stage shows how great Sonic Adventure easily could have been if they just left out some of the bullshit and made the entire game like this. But they didn't. This stage was literally too good to be true. So let's just take another look at what we got. Tails plays a lot like Sonic. He's fast, he jumps, and he can roll. He can't spin dash like Sonic can, but he does have what is perhaps an even greater ability. He can fly for short spurts, and there's a level up by him that you can find early on that keeps him airborne a little longer and makes him fly much faster. The idea of Tails' gameplay is to race against Sonic through areas where Tails would simply follow the player around in Sonic's campaign. This works thematically because Tails has always been in Sonic's shadow, and by keeping up with him and even surpassing him, Tails comes into his own. However, Tails only visits one act per each of the 5 stages he visits. For example, he can only access Act 3 of Windy Valley, the act best suited for having a race. I'd have loved to fly around in the old version. I mean, jeez, look at this. Maybe this is the reason they completely redesigned this stage, to make it more fair for Sonic. Then again, maybe I'm just bullshitting. Anyway, similarly, in Ice Cap, all the platforming and exploration in the first 2 acts is completely ignored and you start with Tails in Act 3, snowboarding with Sonic. These touches keep Tails' campaign nice and short and sweet. His gameplay is similar enough to Sonic's that he can hold his own against the Blue Blur, but he only visits half as many areas and half as many stages, if even that much. Although there is the usual hub world and minigame fluff to deal with on the side, which can take up even more time than the actual zones, Tails' campaign is just short enough that he isn't too much of a distraction from Sonic's and he doesn't wear out as welcome, and this is the longest any of these other campaigns ever get. That's not to speak badly of Tails' gameplay at its core though. As it is, Tails is quite fun, more fun than he's ever been in any other Sonic game to date, and on a side note, we do get glimpses of what a more Tails-focused game could have been like. In Speed Highway, the final stage in Tails' campaign, he raced against Eggman through Act 1 to deactivate a fallen missile before the Mad Doctor can detonate it himself and blow up all of Station Square. The stage starts out much the same as Sonic's does, but partway through the stage, Tails' path diverges from Sonic, and he's sent to a different part of the level that, to my knowledge, is unbeatable for the titular hedgehog. I've heard that some people have managed to reach this Tails-centric area as Sonic, but it wasn't designed for him, and I have yet to hear of anyone successfully clearing it as Sonic. Understandably so, because the act ends with a very long platforming section built specifically with Tails in mind. The platforms themselves are spaced far apart, but they're big and usually give you a lot of room to land after flying. There are also these rings that send Tails further and reset his flight, allowing him to reach even more distant platforms before tuckering out. It's pretty basic stuff and hardly remarkable, but it does make the most of Tails' abilities, and I would have liked to see more areas like this in other stages, more shortcuts and chunks of levels dedicated to Tails. Sure, the only reason this level is the way it is because Eggman can fly in his Eggmobile whereas Sonic can't, but I think they could have found ways to balance this out all the same. I will say while winning these stages isn't hard by any stretch, it has the most obvious rubber banding I've ever seen. Jeez, look at this, it's enough to make other games blush. Now let's talk about Knuckles. This is where things get divisive. Before we talk about Knuckles' gimmick, let's take a look at how his levels are designed. Like Tails, Knuckles only visits 5 of the 11 zones, half as many as Sonic does, and in each stage he only visits one act. On top of that, they're all different acts than the ones Tails visits. For example, in Casinopolis, entering the stage as Tails jumps you right ahead to the sewer area, which is a bit more linear and well suited for Tails' gameplay. Knuckles, on the other hand, is sent to the opening area, which is a little more than a mini-hub world for Sonic where you can access the pinball machines and sewer area, which, unless my memory is off, are inaccessible to Knuckles. Sonic isn't very well suited for making his way around the main area though. As Sonic, it's better to just ditch this place and play some pinball or go to the sewers, but Knuckles can reach all sorts of other places with great ease. Then there's Red Mountain. In this zone, Knuckles is only playable in the first of his 2 acts. Sonic can make it from one end of the act to the other easily enough, with a good route planned out just for him. But for Knuckles, this whole area is one huge playground. You can scale the tall rock formations and glide across bottomless chasms from one rock to the next. You'll see most of the places Sonic goes through on his run, but these places are of little consequence to Knuckles as he can basically go wherever he wants. He isn't confined to Sonic's path. In this respect, Knuckles is the most overpowered character in the game. We'll touch upon this later though. Next is Act 3 of Lost World, which, as you can probably guess, is the only part of the zone available to Knuckles. In this area, Sonic has to make his way around elaborate obstacles, and run along walls on paths created by pushing switches. He has a pretty linear, albeit roundabout set path through the stage. Though some players have made their own shortcuts, Knuckles, as you can guess, has a much easier time getting around, and these obstacles that gave Sonic trouble are of little concern to him. The whole thing is just one giant room, as is his next stage. In Skydeck, Sonic plays through all 3 areas, however Tails only races him through Act 1, while Knuckles is dropped right into Act 3. In this part of the level, Sonic is at the mercy of gravity as a ship occasionally changes its course, at one point flying straight upward. However, Knuckles can not only reach a lot of places Sonic can't, but he's given the choice to change the egg carrier's course himself by pushing or pulling a lever right where you start, which can make his objective easier or harder. Some would even claim that Knuckles is the one responsible for the egg carrier suddenly changing its course when Sonic is in this room, because they're both here at the same time and they just barely miss each other. In any case, Knuckles feels much more in control of things here. This is clearly his part of the stage. Then there's Speed Highway Act 3, or At Dawn as some like to call it, after the song that plays in it. I've saved this one for last even though it's Knuckles' first stage, because I think it illustrates my point best out of all 5 stages. Tails only plays in the first act of this stage. It fits him and he has an entire platforming section dedicated to him. Sonic goes to the entire zone minus Tails' route and eventually passes through here, but this act is a bit of an afterthought. All you do is make a left turn, a right turn, another left turn, a U-turn, and there's the end of the level. Sonic has very little to do in this stage, and it's over extremely quickly because it just isn't designed for someone with his fairly limited moveset. He can reach most areas with some doing, but for the most part this entire area is designed for Knuckles, who as established can climb up walls and glide from each building to the next. You'll find lots of goodies on the rooftops and hidden areas that would be fairly difficult to reach with Sonic, but Knuckles has no trouble getting around here because the whole area is designed to cater to someone with his abilities. In short, instead of simply making Knuckles run, glide, and climb through the same areas as Sonic does, the designers looked at how differently he plays and dedicated entire levels to him, which is both a positive and a negative. I say it's a positive because it shows that the designers very well knew what they were doing, at least to some degree, enough to make a huge honest effort to flesh out Knuckles' gameplay and really make him stand out. This is anything but lazy. But then we get to his gimmick. There are 2 reasons to explore in a Sonic game. One is to try to determine the quickest route to the end of the stage, since Sonic is, at its core, a game made for speedrunning. Taking a few extra tries to check out the other parts of a stage and find the optimal path to the end in repeat playthroughs is part of the fun. For some, like myself, it's the best part. The other reason for exploring is to find collectibles. Rings, extra lives, and shields that may be a bit off the beaten path in a special nook or cranny you may not notice the first time, and surprisingly enough, there's plenty of that to be found in Sonic Adventure, including these Knuckles-centric areas. But in terms of speedrunning, there's a bit of an issue, since there is no point B in Knuckles' levels, and if there was, he could clear most areas in less than 30 seconds, maybe 15. Like I said, he's pretty overpowered and can bypass and outright ignore most of the obstacles in any given stage you drop him into. So the designers found a way to keep Knuckles in these stages longer. I've been around the bush long enough. I'm sure you've all noticed those blinking icons at the bottom of the screen by now and may be wondering what the heck they are. Those are Knuckles' objective. At the start of Knuckles' campaign, the Master Emerald is destroyed right under his nose, likely by a shot from the nearby egg carrier, splitting it into 15 pieces and releasing Chaos, who was trapped inside. You with me so far? Okay, so for the rest of Knuckles' campaign, your goal is to track down enough Emerald Shards to restore the Master Emerald, 3 shards per stage using Knuckles' ability to sense nearby pieces, represented by a radar. Now, before we talk about the radar, I want to clarify something about the way this gimmick works and hopefully clear up some misconceptions about it. First off, the placement of the 3 Emerald Shards in any given stage is somewhat randomized. You may not know this when you play through these stages the first time, but when you enter them in repeat playthroughs, you won't find the emeralds in the same places you did before. Sure, you may eventually if you replayed the stage enough times, but the placement of the emerald pieces always changes. Some of you may be hitting your head on your desks right now, but let me inform you that this is not as bad as it seems. First off, look at the size of some of these levels. There is no way they can come up with 100,000 places to put these things. You won't find them just anywhere. They aren't that level of random. They're usually in places that have something distinct about them. They may be buried at the foot of some landmark or a burial ground, or inside a tiny room you may not have noticed otherwise, or heck, they may even be hidden inside an enemy. Point is, they aren't as random as some may think. They don't completely throw level design out the window with a random number generator. There are only so many places the emeralds can appear in. Not only that, but the combinations of places the 3 emeralds can be hidden in doesn't go that high either. I don't know how many of the thousands, if not millions, of possible combinations were programmed into the game, but I can't imagine it being more than a few dozen, honestly. They're not that cruel. Here's the point I'm getting at. To some, the whole idea of making these stages a scavenger hunt where the treasures are moved around every time is extremely counterintuitive in a game based on speedrunning, since you can't really find and practice any one optimal route to collecting the emerald shards as quickly as possible. Not on paper, anyway. However, I think the people executing this idea came up with a nice compromise. With only so many places to find the emeralds and only so many combinations they can be arranged in, the idea is to replay these stages so many times you eventually memorize where the emeralds are placed and can pinpoint the locations of the second and third emerald pieces once you've located the first one. To give a simple example, you find piece A, and you know that when A is there, B is usually to the left and C is usually to the right. So you find B and C based on where you found A. Now, I have no doubt many will still see this as problematic, since no one can reasonably be expected to dedicate that much time and brainpower to such a tedious task, but I appreciate the steps these people took to give these stages frankly insane replay value without shitting the bed. Personally, I support these decisions. If the emeralds always appear in the same 3 places, then these stages would have very little replay value, and there'd be no point in exploring the wealth of nooks and crannies sprinkled throughout the stage. You could just ignore 95% of the level by going straight to the emeralds. However unreasonable it may still seem to some, well, at least they were kind enough to give us an emerald detector. I have to say, this radar is extremely helpful and one of the simplest yet most intuitive I've seen in, well, any game. They flash through 5 colors, blue when you're getting kinda close to an emerald piece, and red when you're right on top of it. That alone was a pretty smart move, but they also make a binging noise that increases in frequency as you get closer to the emerald pieces. Like every step you take makes it bing just a little bit faster. Just keeping an ear out as you glide around is enough to keep you heading in the right direction and can help you instantly correct your course if you start going off track. In short, I think the radar is quite brilliant and is extremely helpful when it comes to finding the emerald pieces. I think it's safe to say that we'd be completely lost without it, so maybe now you'll understand why I greatly prefer this radar over the far less helpful radar you get in Sonic Adventure 2. In these stages, which are even more specialized and Knuckles-centric than before, and oftentimes humongous, the radar only has 3 color phases, not 5. Now, that alone isn't so bad, but the bing is also forever locked in 3 corresponding frequencies. There's no steady transition from one to the next, making it hard to tell if you're actually getting closer or not until it's too late. I also don't think it reaches nearly as far, but I could be wrong about that, and maybe it just feels that way because these levels are so much bigger than in the previous games, so even if it does reach just as far, it doesn't help quite as much. Also, look at how bright and huge the emerald pieces are in Adventure 1, and how tiny and dim and hard to spot they are in Adventure 2. Now look, one can just chalk this up as an effort to make Knuckles levels in Adventure 2 more challenging, leaving more up to the player to find the emerald pieces, so by themselves, I don't mind the negatives we've listed so far much. I can forgive these choices. But then there's one that's so stupid it leaves me dumbfounded to this day. See, one of the many things that makes the radar in Adventure 1 so much more helpful than Adventure 2's radar is that it can pinpoint more than one emerald piece at a time. I mean, of course, right? In Adventure 2, it can do that, but sometimes it doesn't. A lot of times the emerald pieces will be there, they're loaded into the stage, but then at least one of the shards won't even register on the radar until you've found the other ones. That's right, the radar ignores emerald pieces until it feels like working again. It actively misleads you, and it does this pretty routinely. You might stumble upon an emerald piece by complete accident because the radar didn't tell you it was there, or you might whiz past it on the way to looking for another piece and take another 5, maybe even 10 minutes to find it because of course you're not going to turn around and look where you've already been until you've exhausted all other options and covered every other corner of the stage and have no choice but to go back. Who wants to go around in circles in the same spots just on the off chance that the emerald piece might suddenly show up there now? And these levels are so big, it's not like you'll find one piece and then suddenly the radar registers a piece it went before and it starts binging again, because it's usually too far away to detect by that point, and you have to turn back just in case, even though for all you know, you could be wasting so much time by doing this. This stage has 2 areas, and you basically warp from one to the other by riding a turtle. It's pretty odd. Let's say there's a piece in the first area, but you can't find it because the radar doesn't pick it up, so you go to the second area. Let's say there are 2 pieces in this area, but the radar only detects one of them. Then let's say you find it, and you decide to return to the first area, and now the radar works here, but there's still only 1 emerald shard to find here, so you go back to the second area, and now it picks up the other piece that was here all along that it just ignored before. This is so freaking stupid. And it's not just for the reasons I've listed so far. Adding to the pile, Sonic Adventure 2 has an even bigger emphasis on speedrunning than most other Sonic games, even grading the player's performance at the end based on how quick they were and how many tricks they pulled off on the way to get Mondo points, dude! Sure, if you do happen to trip over an invisible emerald piece without any hints whatsoever, you get good points, but that's just a happy accident, and it baffles me that the game where speedrunning is made so important is also the game where the tool used for completing Knuckles stages as quickly as possible is downgraded in so many ways to be so much less useful for speedrunning. It is downright counterintuitive at times. Compared to these stages, the Knuckles stages in Adventure 1 are nothing to complain about. They're a cakewalk, and for some, that's why they prefer Knuckles stages in Adventure 2, because it is a bigger challenge for them, and they get that rush when they do find an emerald without the radar's help. Compared to these, they find the Knuckles stages in Adventure 1 to be such a breeze that they become numb to them. Point is, anyone who rails on Adventure 1's treasure hunting gameplay needs a bit more perspective. It's not perfect, but it's very accommodating for what it is. I understand if I'm coming off as an apologist, but I don't think there's anything to apologize for here. Sonic Adventure 2, maybe. Anyway, let's talk about the other characters before moving on to that game. Oh shit, this video is already longer than the first one because I've spent so much time talking about Knuckles gameplay? Why do I do this to you people? Well, it won't take nearly as long to cover the other 3 playable characters in the first Sonic Adventure, and I won't have much to say about the treasure hunting gameplay in Sonic Adventure 2 since I've already talked about it a fair bit here, though there is still some to be said. Well anyway, I hope you guys are enjoying this so far and haven't gotten sick of hearing me ramble about this crap. But you have to understand why I'm making this little video series. This is meant to be my ultimate statement on the Sonic Adventure games, the final word as far as I'm concerned. So I'm not glossing over anything I feel needs to be talked about, cause yeah, it could very well be the last time I ever do. And if you're stuck with me so far, well, thanks. See you next time, doodles!